Hi there, and welcome to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits, and this is a little weekly podcast where I try my best to answer some of your questions. Today I am wearing my framed sweater because by the time you see this, I will be in Rhinebeck, New York, gearing up for one of the most magical days of the year tomorrow, which is the New York Sheep and Wool Festival. So I look forward to this with so much anticipation every year. It is just such a celebration of the fiber arts and knitting and crochet and spinning and just all things woolly and sheepy and wonderful. And it happens in the height of autumn in upstate New York. So it's pretty magical and I love it. I'm trying to think of how many years I've gone now. I went for the first time when Levi, my son, was just a few months old. He was a baby and I brought him. And it was so much fun. It's very, very sweet having him along with me. And then I think I skipped a year because I was like, okay, I don't think I could do this with a toddler quite as easily as little baby, you know? So anyways, then I started going again when we started doing our big Rhinebeck sweater knit along every year. And this is, what year is this? Year 7 or 8 minus, obviously I didn't go in 2020. So anyways, so exciting. I hope to see you there if you're going to be there. I am actually going to get this part out of the way right now in hopes to have as many people know what the plan is as possible. So for the meetup, for any of you that are going to Rhinebeck, New York Sheep and Wool tomorrow, Saturday, we always have our meetup at 2 p.m. and we have it on the hill. The hill is basically kind of like in the middle of the festival. So if you're coming from the back entrance near all the food stalls, as you come in the entrance, you're forced to, you come in like this, you're kind of forced to go right and head up this way. And then you can keep going or you can turn left down a paved area. So not into like the barn area. You're going to keep going to where it's paved. You're going to go left there. And if you keep going and keep an eye like looking over to the left, you're probably going to end up seeing the hill because there's like a big old tree. There tends to be some little, I feel like that's where they tend to do some of the exotic animals are right there. But if you go to the right, there's all big barns with tons of different stalls to go shopping and everything like that. But to the left is the hill. So if you are coming from the other side, what I think of as the front entrance, you're gonna see the hill. You kind of come in by it and it's gonna be to your left if memory serves. But I'm not great with directions, so I apologize if you're like, I'm not gonna remember anything you just said. They do have a map on their site, so just go ahead and search New York Sheep and Wool. It'll take you right to their website and they have a map of the grounds. So you can look there. And I recommend that if you wanna go and be there for the meetup and especially for the group picture, I would even find it quick just so you know where it is if you haven't been there before. Another way to find it is just to follow the people in this sweater and you'll probably be able to spot a couple and you can kind of follow them towards the meetup. So we always do a big group photo and then I always stick around and I do a meet and greet. And so if you want to say hi, you want to snap a photo, you want to show me your sweater, I will be there along with Kate and Rachel from Spin Cycle Yarns and Candace from the Farmer's Daughter Fibers. We are going to do the photo first so that anyone who doesn't care about the meet and greet portion can go have fun and enjoy the festival and not have to just sit around on the hill for an hour. So our goal is to take the photo at 10 after 2. So get to the hill by 2 if you're planning on joining in on the fun. But know that if you get there at 10 after 2, you may have missed the photo. And the photo is really, really fun. We try to get everybody in and it's nice because on the hill, it kind of gives us a graded area so we can kind of stack everyone up. So our goal is we will be there at the latest by 2, if not a few minutes beforehand. And we're going to immediately start trying to get everyone organized for that photo. And then after the photo, I will stick around for at least an hour to do meet and greet, say hello. I generally don't ever leave until anyone who does want to stop by and say hi has that chance. So there is all the important Rhinebeck information. Framed sweater is obviously kind of the star of the meetup, but you are also, if you did not finish your sweater, every single year we have people come bring their partially finished sweaters, and it's actually really fun and pretty funny because people will try and put on a half-knit sweater, or they'll just hold it up, like you can just bring it. So whips are always welcome, works in progress. Also the cowl, if you did the frame your face cowl, that is also totally welcome to bring that and wear that and be in the photo. So I think that is all the important Rhinebeck stuff. We did an Instagram live this past Saturday where we kind of talked about some of our favorite Rhinebeck tips, including like food, bathroom situations, stuff like that, handling the big crowds, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to watch that, if you weren't around for the Saturday when we did it, I always save it. So you can go over to my Instagram and just find it right on my grid and watch it at your leisure. Okay, so again, I am wearing the framed pullover. You can find it on my website or in my Ravelry shop. I used the Farmer's Daughter Fibers and Spin Cycle Yarns collaboration yarn, which is called the Spinster's Daughter. And that is the solid colors you see in here, the silvery white and then the green. And then for the color work, I used Spin Cycle Yarns Dream State. So those are the yarns in my sweater. And now let's get to some questions. All right, question number 1. I excitedly cast on Metamorphic this week and have been zooming through the yoke increases. After I took a picture of my progress, to my horror, I realized I somehow put the beginning of round on the back of the sweater. Perhaps I miscounted my short rows in the neckband. And now the decorative slip stitch column is in the back of the sweater instead of the front. I think there's probably no way to avoid the inevitable that I have to frog all my hours of progress, but I thought I would reach out to see if you have any other creative solutions. Could I somehow create a matching column in the front with duplicate stitch and keep what I've already done intact? So your beginning of round, if memory serves me, and I don't know why I would have done it differently, but I didn't go peek to verify, the beginning of the round should be in the back. So you didn't mess up there. I usually always put them in the back. You're actually meant to have that slip stitch is front, back, shoulder, shoulder. So you should actually have 4 slip stitches in that pattern. So hopefully you have the sleeve ones. If you don't, if you're missing all 3 of these, I would maybe tear back and start over. If you're only missing the front one, you absolutely could try doing a duplicate stitch and then start doing your slip stitch now. What I would maybe recommend doing is trying the duplicate stitch and see if you like it. See if you feel like it's cohesive enough to give you the look that you want so that it matches your other slip stitch seams that are going on in that sweater. And if you like it, perfect. Now you've got it done and you're just gonna continue on as you were meant to with the slip stitch in the front. If you don't like it, if you feel like you can't quite get it to look like the one on the back, might be worth starting over just since it is such a big design element in that sweater. So there's a couple options for you, but it wouldn't hurt to try. Wouldn't hurt to try. All right, so I have to get one more sip of water. I have a hypothetical question related to tubular cast-ons. I love the look of a tubular bind-off and use it on most of my garments, but the tubular cast-on is a different story. I just can't seem to get it both neat and flexible, so I generally use something else. Since I enjoy the process of the bind-off, could I potentially use a provisional cast-on with a good bit of extra yarn and eventually just sew off those provisional stitches the way I would for a tubular bind-off? Does this make any sense? Would love your thoughts. So I love this idea, and I do find you're actually not the first person I've heard of who prefers the look of either their cast on or their bind off. So here's what I would do before committing to this for a whole project. Try it on a swatch. Do a little swatch, do your provisional cast on, work a few ribbing rows, what have you, bind off, and then go back and try seeing if you can get those stitches back on your needle. What you might need to do to have the correct amount of stitches is you might actually need to cast on one extra stitch with your provisional cast on. Then in your very next row, when you switch to using your main color, you're going to knit 2 of your provisional stitches together. And the reason for this is when we switch directions of our knitting, like we do with provisional cast-ons, you are going this way. But then when you go back to those live stitches, now you're going this way. And think about those V's. You're gonna have it, it's gonna be like this. They're gonna be stacked on top of each other like that. You can't have them like this below. So because of that, it creates this weird half stitch situation. But if you do that little trick of doing an extra stitch and then decreasing it right back out with like a knit 2 together, then you'll have that extra stitch that you need going in the other direction. And then I would still recommend probably doing the 2 setup rows where you slip every other stitch, and then doing your Kitchener bind off and just see if you like it. Did you like the process? And if you did, go ahead and apply it to a bigger project. Oh my goodness, I skipped question 2 and jumped to question 3. So let's go ahead and backtrack to question 2. I'm about to start your birch sweater, and it's my first time using non-superwash wool in such a big project. I just finished swatching and got stitch gauge exactly, but my row gauge is a fair bit tighter than recommended. I know that if I were using superwash, I'd just continue as is because the weight of the sweater is really going to pull that down, especially in the yoke. But I'm not familiar enough with non-superwash to know if this is going to be true in this project. Should I knit both the yoke and the body to my personal gauge according to the measurements, knitting more rows to account for my tighter gauge? Or should I just go with the pattern gauge to account for the length growing due to the weight? Okay, so I have a couple things that I would recommend here. One is I would be curious, A, have you wet blocked your swatch? I'm guessing you have. But B, did you happen to measure your swatch before you wet blocked it and then measure it after as well? If not, I would almost urge you to knit one more swatch and to measure before and after, because what we're trying to figure out is how much your row gauge is gonna grow, because it won't grow as much as superwash yarn. You're totally spot on there. In general, superwash yarn grows a lot more than a non-superwash because it doesn't have the same elasticity and like bounce back, but it is still gonna grow. But I have no way to tell you how much. So it's kind of a guessing game of how much growth you're gonna have in that finished sweater. It's gonna end up being a bit more than you might see in your swatch, even if you do the before and after measuring to kind of try to see how much your rows are gonna grow. But it's gonna at least give you an idea. So I would do that so you can kind of have an idea of, okay, it looks like my stitches tend to grow like about 10% post blocking or whatever it is. So you know, okay, if they grow about 10% and I need 10 inches, okay, I'm gonna knit to 9 inches and I'm gonna count on that 1 inch of growth kind of a thing. As far as the nice thing is that the birch sweater is a pretty classic sweater. There's not a lot of, you're not dealing with a stitch pattern that you have to have that exact amount. You can absolutely knit to a little bit deeper depth in the yoke and to the body. That's totally fine. So what I would consider doing is, it's top down. So I would go ahead and try on the yoke. And what you can even do is do a little steam block so you can kind of see the growth, or put it onto waste yarn, wet block your yoke, see how much it grows. And then you know, okay, no, I need another inch, or nope, this feels good. There's enough growth still. I'm gonna get it back on my needles and do the body. The only thing to think about when you do that is I would definitely, well, because I used to have fisherman's ribs, so that shouldn't be tricky. you can just do it in like right after you do your purl round. Go ahead and throw it onto, just losing all my words, waste yarn or like a barber's cord or something, and give it a steam or even wet block it, and then you'll know. That's one of the nice things about knitting from the top down is you can kind of do it in stages like that. So the nice thing is too, is with the body, even if you finish the whole sweater and you're like, oh, this just isn't quite long enough, it's not the end of the world to take out that hem, knit the body a little bit longer and rebind off. But you do want to make sure that the yoke feels good. Okay. Bum, bada, bum, bum. Okay, I really want to make the velvet mirror cowl, but I keep putting it off because of the provisional cast on. I'm left-handed and really struggle with using the crochet hook in my right hand. I've only done it once before for a project that only needed a few stitches provisionally cast on, and it was frustrating and took me forever. In other words, it stole your joy, so that's no good. I'm wondering if I can do the provisional cast on mirrored with the crochet hook in my left hand, or would that have my stitches on the wrong needle? I tried Googling, but hadn't been able to find the answer. Just to clarify, I knit continental. My working needle is the right-handed needle. Okay, so here is what I would do. I actually did a very quick search. There are other kinds of provisional cast-ons, not only the one I use in the pattern. So you might want to seek out just a different provisional cast-on. There's one, for instance, where you could crochet just a crochet chain, and then you knit into the back of the chain, you knit stitches, and then you're going to unzip that, and it kind of works the same way. If you want to try doing it with the crochet hook in your right hand, I would just try it with like 10 stitches and then look at it and see what's going on there. Does this work? The only thing that I came up with is I wonder if your stitches will just be mounted in the wrong direction, and that's easy to fix. You would just work through the back loop that first round or go through and flip them to the right direction real quick. So I don't think that would be the end of the world. I would just try it on a smaller scale first just to see how that feels for you and how the stitches end up mounted on your needle. I haven't tried it myself. Or I would look up just a different kind of provisional cast on, because there are other ones out there. I actually did search because I was like, is there any I would recommend? I didn't have enough time to seek out a link for you. I got so excited though, because I found this one and it said holding the crochet hook in your left hand. And I was like, oh my gosh, look, this one would hold it in the left hand. But then they went like this. So they were holding it in the left hand to wrap the yarn, but then they took the crochet hook back into the right hand to like pull the stitch through. So I was like, I don't think that would probably really help. But the other option that you could consider doing would be to just cast on and seam your cowl instead of grafting it at the end. The cons to that method are, I find it to be a little more visible, so you're not gonna have quite an invisible connection, but I just hide it in the twist, you know, like when I'm wearing it. So I have cowls that they are seamed instead of doing the provisional cast on. The other thing which you would have to look at, and I just didn't have a chance to check, I can't remember if that has an empty row in the patterning. By empty, I mean a row that only uses one color instead of two, where you could seam it together. If not, you would then need to go through with your contrast yarn and do some duplicate stitches to hide where you all of a sudden have one solid row from where you seamed it. If you want it to try and look like as cohesive as possible. So anyways, there's a couple ideas for you, and I hope one of them works out. I definitely, if it were me, because you might run into provisional cast-ons in future directions, I would seek out one that you like, because there's different ways to do it, and that might be really nice to have in your little toolbox of like, this is the provisional cast-on I like, that works for me. You know, it's how I feel about like short rows or the type of heel we like to knit on a sock. Like, it can just be nice to know, okay, this is the method that brings me joy, that I can, you know, I feel like I can do it. I like how it turns out, etc. Oh my goodness. A couple of nights ago, like a week ago, apparently I haven't looked at my fingers in a while. I accidentally grabbed the handle of a hot pot, and like, I know better. I am pretty cautious in the kitchen. And I just had a moment where it was like right at the end of getting dinner on the table. And I mean, I grabbed and lifted. So it was in my hand for a second. It hurt so bad. I had to go to bed with like a nice bag on my fingers. And miraculously, the next day it felt fine. I like no more pain, which was crazy because the night before it hurt so bad. Anyways, I just looked down, and again, this was a solid week or so ago. And I have little blisters on my fingers. And I can't believe I didn't notice till just now. Life's been pretty busy lately, so I just didn't even notice. But you can imagine, especially my fear in the moment of like, I can't not be able to knit, you know? So I'm generally pretty careful with my hands, but okay. Okay, we are on to the last question. And it's also on tubulars, but we are going to chat about the tubular bind off now. So I'm working on the Give 2 sweater. Love, love, love the texture. I'm so happy you like the texture because I've just used it in like 2 more patterns because I also love the texture. Things are going super well until I went to cast off the body. This is my first time using the tubular Kitchener bind off method. So I'm not sure exactly what went wrong, I'm gonna say, because in the moment I know that that word's not gonna come out of my mouth in the way that it should. Ari. I've looked at it too many times and now it just sounds like gobbledygook in my head. It went awry. Anyways, it went wrong. Things got off track. But the edge of the sweater is terribly rigid. I'm just imagining you all shouting at me the pronunciation. Okay. Focus. Okay. Like immovable. Looking back, I think the difficulty may have started in the tubular bind off rows. That's when my stitches started to feel a little tight. It was very difficult, almost impossible to slip the knits and purls onto 2 needles. It took a really long time and there was a fuzz lying everywhere from the friction of the stitches against the needles. Going down a needle size helped with the stitch transfer, but the Kitchener finish is so tight that I can't even try the sweater on anymore. Have you come across this issue before? What do you think might have gone wrong? If my fear of doing this again wins, is there a bind off you'd recommend to yield a similar look? I still have to add the sleeves, so I'm hoping to figure this out so I can try it again on the sleeves. Worst case, I rip out and do a standard bind off. But if there is a way to make this stretchy, rounded edge it's intended to be, I'd love to make that happen. Okay, so this is one of those times where I wish I could like peek over your shoulder and just watch you do it for a minute. My guess is that yes, when you were doing, so those 2 like setup rows for the bind off, we work a stitch, we slip a stitch, we work a stitch, we slip a stitch. My guess is that when you slipped the stitch and then worked the next stitch, you were just too tight. You were just knitting them and taking all, so we want almost like a little float as though you're doing color work. You're slipping the stitch. You want to keep that yarn the same width as the stitch that it's being slipped in front or behind of, and then knit the next stitch. So my guess is that when you went to go knit or purl the next stitch, you just did it super tight so that it kind of took all the gap out in between, like it took all your flexibility away. So one thing you can do before attempting it on the sweater again, cast on, 15, 20 stitches, knit a little swatch of ribbing and practice on there. And just practice when you do those 2 setup rows, don't yank out all of that float in between the stitches. So when you do it, it'll say like, slip 1 with yarn in front and then knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in front, knit 1. So when you slip that 1 with yarn in front, just think about the yarn you're carrying in front should be the width of that stitch, and then knit your next one. So if you notice yourself pulling and it brings, so you have 3 stitches, you're slipping this guy. If when you knit the first and second stitch, they end up squeezed so they're next to each other, just squeezing this guy right out, too tight. So I think like from what you said, you should not have had to battle. It shouldn't have felt so hard to get it through your needles. I'm so sorry. That must have not been very fun. So yeah, if that is the case, it's just way too tight. Try and loosen up. Put on some jazz and okay, except for that jazz that starts getting really intense. You're at the habits where we'll play jazz while we're like making dinner, and all of a sudden something like really gets going, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's so intense. Okay, so that's the first thing. Next thing is when you do Kitchener. That can be another area where people just do it way too tight. So it's really tempting when you're doing the Kitchener stitch to bind off those stitches, to yank it so that it looks really tidy. Don't do that. And what you can do to check it is every so often as you're working, do this. Give it a nice little boop boop. Am I staying stretchy? If it starts to feel like, you know, I mean, that's still stretchy, but like where you can't move, you're doing it too tight. Just loosen up and try not to, just don't always be pulling the slack out from what you've just done. Like do it just so it's just neat enough. Sometimes what I'll even do, which I don't think I've shared on here before, but I'm just now realizing I do this, is I will pinch with my fingers and I'll hold my stitches. I'm actually gonna do it with this one. I will hold those little stitches in place while I'm Kitchenering through the top of them so that they're not like moving together. It kind of helps keep me, so I can only pull it so much because my fingers are keeping those where they need to be so that I can't tug the slack out and make them all go schwink. So sounds like you just did it too tight, but practice on a swatch, and then because you want to feel confident the next time you go about it. And I think that'll help. All right, that, my friends, is all of the questions. Okay, so the Rhinebeck frame knit along is basically coming to an end this weekend. It officially ends, I think, Monday. You should go look at that. But we do still have the Insta Friends knit along going on featuring the Hey Sailor sweater. We have got Wool and Honey is hosting a broom sweater knit along. We've got our year-long Traveler Series spin along / knit along. And right around the corner, we have our fall knit along challenge, which I am very excited for. Cannot wait for that one. So if you're gonna be at New York Sheep and Wool, I hope to see you there. Make sure to come say hi over on the hill. I will be there for a while saying hi, and I'd love to see your sweater if you made one, or your cowl. And otherwise, I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I hope to see you back here next week. Bye.